Hey everybody, it's Brandon here with Investment Joy. We're taking a little bit different view, and I've got my current best new friend, Matt Cox.
We're so close, you know it's Matt. Yeah, it's Matthew Cox or Matt Cox. You can call me Matt. Everybody says Matt. It ends up being Matt.
Okay.
That's what it ends up being.
His name's Matt Cox. I had to ask him. Matt Cox, and you went to, how long were you sentenced to jail for?
I was sentenced for 26 years. I ended up doing 12 and a half years.
12 and a half years, sentenced for 26 years. And tell me, and the internet, why?
I mean, it was what the charges were, or what just the basic story.
The basic story.
Yeah, it was bank fraud. I mean, I did a series of real estate related scams. You want to do the story? You want me to just tell you what I did?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know we were doing that right now. Okay, that's
well,
cool.
We might as well, because then we
cool.
can clip it in.
Get rid of it. Get it over with. I mean, basically, I own a mortgage company. Like, what version do you want? You want the 10-minute version, the 30-minute, the hour?
The 10-minute version.
Okay, the 10-minute version is I own a mortgage company. I own a mortgage company. The mortgage company was committing fraud. You know, this was back in 2001, 2000, 2001, 2002. You know, throughout those years. Well, eventually, I ended up getting indicted by the FBI for lying on an application.
Okay.
So I then really couldn't own the mortgage company anymore, because now I ended up I was on federal probation for 3 years.
Okay.
While I was on federal probation, you know, basically I decided, instead of like claiming bankruptcy and starting over, the things that I had learned during my time as a mortgage broker, I decided I was going to go ahead and commit a larger, more extensive fraud. Because what I'd been doing before was things that mortgage brokers tended to do at that time, and still do. Like, you know, you're changing a number on a W-2. Like, if your customer, she's making $35,000, but if she made $42,000, she could get the loan.
Yeah.
So I changed her W-2.
Yeah.
She's making $42,000. So now she gets the loan, and I didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time. Of course, it catches up to me.
Yeah.
I end up getting in trouble. I lose the mortgage company, and I ended up starting a larger scam. And that scam was that I decided I was going to start flipping properties.
Okay.
But obviously, one of the problems with flipping properties is the places you can buy properties cheap, you know, lower income areas.
Yeah.
So you buy a property for 30 or 40 grand, you fix it up for 20 grand, you sell it, and maybe you make $15,000 or $30,000, right?
Okay.
So if you're doing this consistently,
yeah.
so you know you're not always getting the great deal. You get the great deal twice a year.
Yeah.
You know, but on average, you're buying, fixing them up, selling them. Well, the problem with that is the borrowers that actually buy properties in those areas aren't great borrowers. They don't have, you know, this is the guy who's got 4 jobs in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, he doesn't have his down payment. He doesn't have perfect credit.
Sure.
So that's an issue. I'm not saying, sure, he's a decent guy, but the point is he's not a great borrower.
Yeah.
So the problem is then, you know, these are the people that quit their jobs a week before closing, or they or they don't have the money. The last minute they can't scrape together the money, or they get a 30-day late.
As a sidebar, I had a closing that was screwed up, and this is a Southern Ohio story, because he bought and sold 2 coon dogs. They were basset hounds for raccoon hunting, and they were $5,000 transactions a piece, and it totally destroyed the closing, because he said, well, I wanted to go out and buy one right before closing. Yeah, threw the whole thing up.
I mean, people are just
those kinds of people.
Yeah, the people that quit their job 2 days beforehand.
Yep.
No, but I got a better job. It starts in 2 weeks. Well, great. Then we have to wait a month to get 2 weeks pay stubs. You know, they don't realize they just do these stupid things. So, point is that. So what I thought was, one, I've got a problem. If I buy these houses, my problem is I have to get them appraised at a certain value.
Yep.
Second thing is the people that I'm selling to are not great borrowers. So I need to get better borrowers.
Sure.
So me being me, I decided what I need to do is I need to create a market that is conducive to high appraisals.
Sure.
How do I do that? I buy properties for $40,000. I record the value of those sales at $200,000.
Okay.
And if I do enough of them in a small enough area, the value in that area will shoot through the roof.
Yeah, because then they start using your prior prior sales.
They're
as
using.
comps.
I'm creating my own comparable
Yes.
sales.
Yeah.
And also the thing is fixing these properties up. Do I want to spend 20 or 30,000, or do I just want to fix up the outside of the property?
Yep.
So I started just cleaning up the outside of the property. Well, now who's going to buy this property? It looks good on an appraisal, but it's not really a great property. Doesn't matter because those borrowers aren't any good anyway.
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own borrowers. So I start creating synthetic identities.
Okay.
I figure out how to get Social Security to issue Social Security numbers to children that don't exist.
Okay. Wow.
It's a little difficult. It was a few phone calls.
Wow. Only a few.
There was a few phone calls, and I had to figure out how to make a birth certificate and a shot record. So I start going
wow.
to Social Security, giving them a fake shot record, fake birth certificate.
Dang.
And they were issuing me Social Security numbers to children that were like 10 months old. I would then go and I'd get 3 secured credit cards in their name. I'd make the payments.
Okay.
And now when you
now when your synthetic child has a credit pull, it's
Right.
pretty dang good.
And of course, when I apply for those credit cards, I don't say he's 10 months old. I say he's 33 or 34.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that records it in the system, creates a
Yep.
fake credit profile, and
Yep.
now I have a person that's 34 years old that has perfect credit.
Yeah.
If you make the payments for long enough, about
Yeah.
6 months, they suddenly have 700 credit
Yeah.
scores.
Yeah.
And I'm barely putting anything on the credit cards because
Sure, yeah.
I don't need them.
Yeah.
So you got a $500 credit card with $40 on it.
Sure. Yeah.
So now I've got borrowers that are ready to buy my $200,000 houses. I create fake jobs, fake banks, fake everything on the internet, and now they come in and I have them buy the properties that are worth $200,000. And so when they buy them from me, initially they bought them from me, but eventually I started just buying the property for $40,000 in that guy's name and recording it in his name.
Okay.
So he owns a $200,000 property that he owes 40 grand on. He then goes to Countrywide or SunTrust or Pinnacle Bank,
Sure.
and they give him a $180,000 loan.
Yeah.
So the 40 to 60 or 70,000 I have in it, I get my money back, and I make $100 and some odd thousand in
Okay.
profit. He buys 5 of these properties and borrows about $1 million, makes 3 or 4 payments, and suddenly has a tragic accident and has to go to the hospital, and
Okay.
he's never going to work again.
Sure.
And
Wow.
and so when he stops paying, the collection agents start calling, and I would send a letter with a fake newspaper article about him being in a car accident.
gosh.
Oh, I put his name in it and everything.
That's amazing.
Car accident, saying he was life flighted, with a letter from his fake sister saying he'd been life flighted, then doctors say he's in a coma, and that even if he comes out of the coma, they say he'll never work again, so you might as well take the house. So I've given them a plausible explanation for what happened.
Okay.
And all the
Wow.
properties go under. The banks lose $100,000. We're losing $100,000 per property, and sometimes more, sometimes less. And they have an explanation on why this happened, and it takes them back then it took them 3 or 4 months to
Yes.
foreclose.
Yeah.
Then they put it on the market. 3 or 4 months later, it's still not selling. Then they lower the price.
Yeah.
They lower the price. They keep every 3 months they would lower the price. And what ends up happening is but within a year, it's really been lowered. But these are bad areas. So by that point, crackheads have gone in, knocked out the windows. They're trashed the place. So
Sure.
the real estate agent's like, yeah, I can see the comparable sales, but this place is horrible. And
Yeah.
the value in the area actually had shot up. So the lenders never knew anything was wrong. And over the course of about 18 months, I borrowed $11.5 million.
11.5 million. And what was your total earnings on the 11.5?
I don't know, maybe 6 or 7
6 or
million.
7 million.
So what happened then was the FBI came in to arrest me. I had a friend that had gotten in trouble,
Okay.
and he told the FBI,
Yeah,
hey, look, he didn't want to go to jail for what
Yeah.
he was doing, and he said, hey, listen, I know a guy who's doing this. So the FBI comes in to arrest me. I have a friend who's a sheriff's deputy who found out prior to this. So my friend who's a sheriff's deputy was told by the girl he used to date on the task force, which was another officer. She
Oh, wow.
told him, your buddy Matt Cox is about to be arrested. He's already on federal probation. He's running a scam. Somebody got arrested. There's a task force. We just gave it to the FBI. They're going to arrest him in the next couple of days.
Oh my
so
goodness.
he tells me, I end up running, I barely had any, I had like maybe 80 grand in cash at the time. So I took off on the run. It always sounds, they always say stuff in the comment section when I say this, but I can't live on $80,000. It's 80 grand. You can't start your life over. Can't retire on 80.
Sure.
So of course now I'm a wanted fugitive from the FBI. So what do? Is I immediately go to Atlanta and I rent somebody's house, and I borrow $400,000 on that house. I actually assume that guy's identity.
Oh my goodness.
I then satisfy the loan on his house. So I go down to public records and I file a false satisfaction of loan from Bank of America. He actually had 2 loans with Bank of America. So I filed false satisfaction of mortgages.
Oh my
Filed
goodness.
them. Those get swiped, right? So now they look satisfied.
Yes. Wow.
I now have an ID in his name. By this point, I figured out how to get the state DMVs to issue me state driver's licenses. And the the State Department to issue me passports. So,
oh my goodness,
I open up a couple. It's funny. The oh my goodness, I open up a couple. I open up a couple bank accounts, and I'm in this guy's house. I go to 3 hard money lenders. You guys, you know what hard money?
Oh yeah,
obviously.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. So I go to 3 hard money lenders, and each one of them lends me $150,000 on his house, even though his house is worth $200,000.
So you're now at 450.
I'm at 450, and I close on those within about a day of each other.
Sure,
Different title
so
companies.
they can get recorded quickly.
Right. So it's a shotgunning scam. So I get the 450, I put the money in the bank, I pull the money out of the bank, I take off, I go to South Carolina, I buy a house at that point, I satisfy another loan, and I buy 2 houses. I end up borrowing $1.3 million in another guy's name. By this point, I'm not even using synthetic identities. I'm actually surveying homeless people and stealing homeless people's identities. And then I could get a real driver's license, a real passport, real everything, and I could open up bank accounts. And of course, if I get some guy's identity that's in Texas and I go open up get a driver's license in South Carolina, they open it up, I open up bank accounts, I buy a house, satisfy the loan, borrow $1.3 million, put the money in the bank, pull the money out. At that point, I actually got caught in a bank in Wachovia. Do they still have Wachovias?
I don't think so.
No.
I think that was one that got wiped out in the mortgage crisis.
Right.
Because you're talking about Countrywide, which I did a lot. See, as Matt's talking here and explaining to everybody the scams that he did, when I got my real estate license back in 2006, I was coming in to assist banks on their loss mitigation team. And like for Countrywide Financial, I don't know how many. I've got a list of all the price opinions I gave. Last time I checked, I did 1,400 of them. And there were neighborhoods in Columbus where I see this scheme that Matt was doing. I was on the valuation side. So earlier on, he said, well, the real estate agent comes in and says, we're in Crack Central and all the windows are broken out. This is a terrible neighborhood. I don't care what your comps say.
Yeah.
I was one of those agents back in 07, 08, 09 telling Countrywide Financial, we don't have too many Wachovias. I think we had a couple Washington Mutuals, but several different banks that don't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I was going in and saying, hey, I'm sorry, but the $1 million worth of property you sent me to values, it's worth $125,000. So this process that you're doing, or you did back in the day, was one that I saw firsthand. I'm like, oh my gosh. So then as the bubble, and what was the time frame between you getting in trouble with the FBI and then you going in and now you're on the run buying a $1.5 or $1.3 million house from...
So I got in trouble with the FBI in 2001.
Okay.
I took off on the run in late 2003.
Okay.
So I was doing this between 2003 2006. I was satisfying the loans on properties. And it's funny you mentioned, like, I owe Countrywide like almost $2 million. That was one of the Washington Mutual, I don't know, I only owe them $300,000 or $400,000, but they caught me multiple times. Like their lawyers, like a lawyer caught me and said, hey, you've committed a crime here. And then they're telling me we're going to call the FBI, and I actually convinced them, let me just give you the money back. I got the money, let me talk to my lawyer.
Interesting.
So it's actually a funny story because I had stolen the identity of a guy named Gary Sullivan.
Okay.
So I stole the guy was a homeless, he was a homeless prostitute
Oh, wow.
So I had actually was interviewing homeless people. So
Sure.
I'm trying to get your information without you understanding that I'm getting your information. So
Yeah.
I'm saying I'm taking a survey to determine where the Salvation Army was going to open our next indigent facility, our next homeless facility.
Sure. Okay.
So I said, hey, I'm taking surveys and I pays $20 cash right now. And so guys would be like, yeah, what do you need? I met a guy named Gary Sullivan, got his information.
Mm-hmm.
Then I ordered his birth certificate, social security card. I registered to vote in his name, got his high school transcripts. I then took all that information and I went to South Carolina, opened up got a an ID in his name. What's funny about that is that one of the properties I bought, I did a shotgunning scam on. I borrowed 3 or 4 mortgages on this property, on this one property. Well, at some point, Washington Mutual, it's convoluted. I'm not going to get into it. It's too lengthy. But what ended up happening was Washington Mutual figured out they were not in first position.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So they figured out there was another mortgage in front of them.
Wow.
So they contacted Gary Sullivan. They called up Gary Sullivan. Phone rings. I'm like, yeah, what's up? Is this Mr. Sullivan? They don't know he's not a real person.
Sure.
I said, yeah. I said, this is Gary. And they said, hey, this is Mr. So-and-so. I'm a lawyer with Washington Mutual. I'm like, okay. They said, we just realized, the title company notified us this. We're not in first position. You got another mortgage in first position. I'm like, he's like, look, I don't know what happened, but we're gonna call the FBI. This is clearly fraud. And I went, whoa. I said, let's not get crazy here. I'm gonna have someone call you back and I think what's in your stockholders' best interest, in your bank's best interest, is that we get you the money back. He was like, yeah, obviously that's the best interest. I said, right now you're not in a great position. If this goes under, you're not in first position.
Yeah.
So let me see if I can just get you the money back. He's, well, you still have the money? I said, absolutely, I can get you the money back. Let me have my attorney call you right back. Give me an hour. I drive to my attorney's. I'm panicked. I call up my attorney, who was a corporate attorney. His partner was a criminal attorney. He actually calls them in. I get there. We walk in the conference room. I explain what happened. Look, they introduced me, Gary Sullivan. Hey, Gary, okay, what happened? I said, okay, here's what happened. I borrowed multiple mortgages on this one piece of property. Washington Mutual figured it out. They want their money back. I owe them $100,000. Mm-hmm. They go, okay. So he says, okay, so so we'll call him up. We'll call up the lawyer. We'll see if we can get the money back. I said, no problem. And he says, okay, well, so they called the guy up. The lawyer says, okay, he can give it the money back? Yes. Okay, so we actually sign a document agreeing that it's not a criminal matter, it's a civil matter, and that they're not going to contact the authorities. No problem. Fax it over, send it over, everything. So so he says, okay, you got to go to Washington Mutual, you have to go to the bank and get $100,000, bring it here, cashier's check, no problem. And so I remember the lawyer goes, okay, well, Gary, that's just one. You've got 4 mortgages on this thing.
Your lawyer says this?
My lawyer says,
okay,
Gary, what's the problem is,
yeah.
Here's the issue, is that what happens if these other mortgage companies
figure it out? And
they go, do you have all the money? I said, no, I still have the money. They go, well, what if they figure it out and they call the FBI? I said, well, then I leave town. And the guy goes, and the 2 lawyers start laughing and they go, Gary, they have your name, your social security number, your date of birth. They'll find you. It's the FBI. They're going to find you. And I go,
so they don't.
And I go, you're assuming my name's Gary Sullivan. And they looked at each other.
Oh, gosh.
They went. And I remember thinking, you know what? They don't meet a lot of guys like me. Oh. And he goes, I remember specifically, he said, you know what? He said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I said, yeah, my immediate problem is paying this guy back. Let me go get the money. I go get the money, I come back, I give him the money, and I remember he goes, okay, well, we need to talk about my fee. And I went, oh, okay, because it happened so fast.
Yeah.
And I went, sure, well, you've been working on this for an hour. What's that worth? He's, well, there's paperwork. We had to type up this agreement. I said, no, I understand. You went to law school. You're important. You're a big shot. How much do I owe you? And he goes, I think $1,500 would. I said, okay. I pull out my wallet. I start to count out cash. He goes, well, we typically don't take cash. And I go, after what you just heard, you take a check from me. And he looked at me and he goes, well, we'll take cash. I'll give you a receipt. I said, no problem. Give him cash. And I leave. That was it.
My goodness.
So, I mean, listen, I've gotten caught multiple times and just paid the banks back.
Yeah.
I mean, we got caught one time for the mortgage company got caught for almost $2 million in bad loans.
Oh, wow.
And they ended up just selling it. I told him I don't have $2 million. And the guy goes, look, we're going to sell it. And if any of these loans come back on us, you promise to help us get rid of them. I said, absolutely.
Interesting.
And they just sold it. Sold to a household bank. Do you remember HSBC?
Yeah, HSBC. Yeah, I did.
Are they still around?
I don't think so. HSBC had a crap load of bad loans here, and then the Bank of New York. I don't know what it was. It was about HSBC because I did a bunch of foreclosures and BPOs for them, and then the Bank of New York. It's just like those banks had a terrible track record, along with Countrywide Financial here in Ohio, and
everywhere.
Well, yeah. Our local banks, though, in my area were great. The little local community banks, they were solid. They expanded during the crisis. My wife and I, we had Countrywide Financial, and I can't get into too big a detail, but as you're saying about how scammy some of these mortgage people were, I've been given pieces of paper by mortgage brokers that says, "Oh, you're making $65,000 this year," and I'm like, "Okay, yeah, really? We're really playing this game here with you doing a stated income loan?"
Yeah,
and it's just it blows my mind. But then seeing how thin Countrywide Financial was on their paperwork, it's not surprising to me as a real estate agent that they went bankrupt over this process that you're describing to me.
Well, we would never. You can't use a local bank because a local bank understands if you say, like, if I'm in Tampa and it's a local, if it's like Tampa Bay Bank,
sure,
and you say, hey, and Ybor City's in Tampa, and you say, hey, I bought this house. This house is in Ybor City. It's worth $300,000. They're smart. They're going to go, whoa. Yeah. There's nothing in Ybor City at that time worth $300,000. So they know, but Countrywide in North Carolina has no idea.
They don't know. They don't care. The loan originator's really excited that he got another check on the box.
Right. And listen. Towards the end, I'm making my own appraisals. I've ordered my own software from Alamo. The appraisal service. I'm making my own. Even if I didn't feel comfortable, I would order an appraisal from a real appraiser who would do all the work for me, hand me the appraisal. I just retype everything, and then anything that they put, deferred maintenance, all that got eliminated.
Oh, wow.
And all the calculations are populated for me. Sure. So by the time I'm done, it's golden. I'm putting everything in there. Wow. I'm typing great thing. Now I've got the appraisal, and then I put everything in their name, and then I send it off. I'd use their license, everything, and then where the contact information there, I would end up making another Gmail account or another
email
whatever.
And phone number.
Right, for them. And now if they have a call, they're going to contact me.
Wow.
They can verify their license, they can verify their insurance, they can verify everything through that appraiser. Sure. But if they say, oh, you know what, there's this one little thing that needs to be corrected, they're going to contact me.
Yeah, wow.
So I was on the run. So after that, I ended up at one point I got caught in a bank. And I got brought downtown. I talked my way out of that. I convinced them I hadn't done anything wrong. Mm-hmm. They'd actually found out there were multiple loans on a house, on a property. I convinced them that the loan officers must have done something wrong. I mean, I certainly didn't. I mean, you're talking to a guy who works for a labor company. How would I? Does it make more sense that these loan officers did something wrong, or that I don't know how to do it? And they were like, yeah. The detective was like, it doesn't make sense. At that time, I was number one on the Secret Service's most wanted list.
Oh my gosh!
So the FBI looking for me, Secret Service, U.S. Marshals.
And oh my goodness!
I ended up going to. I went to South Carolina. I went to Nashville, Tennessee. I borrowed $3.5 million in Nashville. At this point, I'm
$3.5 million in Nashville.
Yeah, $3.5 million. So, I ended up getting caught in Nashville. To shorten it, basically, and keep in mind too, I've been in and out of the country. Everybody says, "Why didn't you leave?" Well, why? I've gotten tickets in stolen identities. I've gotten tickets. I've got passports. I've traveled in and out of the country, and there's no reason for me to leave. I mean, I've had many interactions with law enforcement.
Sure.
I've always talked my way out
of every single time.
So I wasn't concerned. I felt like James Bond.
Wow.
And right up till the end, and then. So I ended up in Nashville, and I was dating a girl, and we were seeing another girl, and Dateline NBC was about to come out with a 1-hour special on me.
Oh my gosh.
And so when we found that out, now I'd already been in like Fortune magazine, Bloomberg Business Week, had done 2 articles. There'd been about 50 articles in the newspapers.
About you?
Oh, specifically.
About this guy? Or
no,
about...
Matt Cox, he's a mortgage fraud, con artist, scammer.
Okay, wow.
But I'd had multiple plastic surgeries. Like I've had a nose job. I had liposuction. I did what's called a mini facelift. I've had 2 hair transplants. I've had liposuction. I mean, I've had everything.
So if I would see a picture from you from 20 years ago, you look completely different?
I don't think I look that. You can look and see though. You're like, yeah, your nose is bulbous, like there are differences, but it's still me. But you know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Like I literally I didn't even know this. The Secret Service told me this. A lawyer doing a closing actually recognized me. He had come in one time, had me start to sign the loan package, and then stopped and looked at me and goes, "Can you hold on a second?" I remember it was weird. He took the loan package with him. And I was like, yeah, okay. Walked in the back. He had a wanted poster of the Secret Service. And he looked at me and he went,
oh my gosh.
He looked at it and he said, he looked at it and he went, well, this guy's wanted out of Atlanta, Georgia. He opened up my file. He said, this guy worked for this company for 5 years in Florida and just moved here to South Carolina.
Okay.
And he went, well, it can't be the same guy then. Closed it, walked in, let me sign sign everything, and I walked out with a check for like $150,000. Anyway, my girlfriend and I, we were cashing checks because I was going to take off. I was actually going to leave the country this time. And the girl we were seeing, my girlfriend confided in her what was happening, and that girl turned me into the Secret Service.
Okay.
And I got grabbed and I got sentenced. And at that point, by the time I got sentenced, the economy had started melting down.
Yeah.
Late 2007.
Okay.
It's just starting to happen.
Yeah.
The cracks are appearing. And so, I got hammered. I got 26 and a half years.
Okay. So you got found out because of a girl?
Yes. Yeah. Everybody says it. It's always a woman. Well, trust me. I gave her plenty of ammunition. It's not like, it's always like, oh, it's a girl. No, I definitely buried myself.
Yeah.
Like, what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but that was the straw that broke the camel's back. Or
yeah, that was the catalyst that brought it all down on me. I mean, I've been juggling for a long time, and and it's so funny because there were so many opportunities. Like I look back now, so many opportunities.
It blows my mind.
So many opportunities where I screwed up over and over.
Yeah.
And it's like every opportunity there was where it's like, you could have mitigated this at this point. You could have done this. You could have done every single time. Made the wrong decision. Made the wrong decision. Made the wrong decision.
And you
kept thinking I was going to get out of it.
Yeah. And it always blows my mind. I've run into people not with this level of fraud, but just either whether it be a business project or something. And it amazes me how people get away with things, or it's just one of those things. It's just almost sheer luck that their house cards start tumbling down. Because I've seen some really shady business deals with local businesses and things, and not to this level, but I've known.
No, this is absolutely blatant.
Yeah, blatant,
over the top.
Yeah,
this isn't like not that there's any such thing as light fraud, but this isn't like something that's subtle and minor and
It's not like a real estate developer loaning $25 million on a local development when it's really only worth 2 or 3.
That's pretty massive. Yeah, that's actually pretty.
You think
massive.
so? Okay.
Yeah. $25 million on a $2 million?
20 to 25 million. I know some local people that have got themselves in ginormous trouble, but then I know guys that do it on a legitimate way. They go and they take $500,000 project. And they figure out how to do, I think it's a 233K or a 233B loan. We're talking about fraud. On this hand, I've seen guys, and I could show you, we could go drive there tomorrow. It was a $50,000 property, and they got the government to loan them 25 plus mil on it. And but why is that legal? Because it's senior housing, and there's a ginormous need for senior housing. You can loan money from the government under a grant program. I think it's the 233K or 233B. I'm sure that's the wrong one, but it's FHA program. And they'll loan you all the money in the world at 1% interest on a 40-year note. 1% interest on a 40-year note. So if your mind starts thinking about it, well, who cares how inflated that price is? It could be 3 times more than it should be worth today just because it's on a 40-year AM with 1% interest. So
yeah,
it's crazy some of the projects that I see people get into, both legitimate and not legitimate, and then I look at them, I think, how is this possible? But the thing, I guess I'm curious, because through this process of all the bank fraud and the identity theft, did you feel like you were James Bond at that point? Did you feel like you were Robin Hood, stealing money from the rich banks that were stealing money from the poor people? What was your internal justification for this, if you had it?
No, I mean, I was look. My goal at that time, what my goal was on Monday, was surviving until Tuesday morning. You know what I mean? Okay. I mean, it was like that. Like, I would love to tell you that there was some end goal. I mean, I obviously always thought, oh, if I get $2-3 million or something in the bank, then I'm gonna, but it would have. I realized that number kept growing. It was $1 million, then it was $2 million, then it was. If I just get $3 or $4 million, it's like, what are you talking about? You got $4 million. If you had $4 million, it's not going to be enough. It's just a matter of, it's just arrogance and greed and narcissism, and it just kept getting fed, and I even used to make the joke that, and I still make the joke, is that if you go into Bank of America, like I used to say, there's no feeling like walking into the bank, giving them all false documentation, having them call you like Mr. Black, oh, Mr. Black, how are you? And the whole time, and then thanking you for being one of the best customers they've ever worked with. And they hand you a check for $250,000 and thank you for ripping them off. And you walk right out. You feel like James Bond. You walk out of there, everything's false, everything's counterfeit, everything's fake, and they absolutely are head over heels in love with you, and they thank you and tell you you're just the best customer they've ever worked with. I mean, so you feel amazing. You walk through passport control with a state-issued passport, but it's not you. They're calling you Joseph Carter or Michael Eckert, and you're handing them and you're answering questions, and you're walking out, and you get on the plane, and you feel amazing. I mean, there's no feeling like that. I was sailing on the Mediterranean. I took a 10-day cruise with, at that point I was 35, 36 years old. My girlfriend's like 23, 24 years old. And we're on the deck, laying in the sun on the Mediterranean, on the run, number 1 on the Secret Service's most wanted list. And I remember looking over at her, and she looked at me, and she goes, and she mouthed, "I love you." And I remember thinking, no matter what happens, this is worth it. Really? I'd like to tell you, I was wrong about that. It was so wrong. But the arrogance of being there and thinking, yeah, I'm on top of the world, all of that is just like, it's when you get 26 years. I mean, bro, it was so not worth it. Yeah. So stupid, just so over the top. Just the arrogance there. I look back and I think, how many times could you have turned yourself in? How many times could you have said, look, I messed up? Go to the FBI and say, look, I messed up. I screwed up. Here's what I did. I need to fix this. I can go to jail for a little bit. I was terrified to go to jail too. I'm a little guy. You're a big guy. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you probably can handle yourself. I'm 5'6". I'm tiny. I can't go to prison. So yeah, I was terrified. Really? But I did. I went to prison, and it was 12 and a half years. I started writing. I wrote a memoir. I wrote my memoir, Shark in the Housing Pool.
Sure.
And then I started writing other guys' stories. And I was interviewed several times. I wrote an ethics and fraud course for the federal government. Wrote a red flags rules course for the federal government.
So you're the reason that I have to sign all this extra paperwork for closings.
Absolutely. And if you're a mortgage broker and you take continuing education courses, like there's an ethics and fraud course it's a 3-hour ethics and fraud every year that I actually teach that course. I've actually been interviewed by people. Remember I told you I was interviewed by a guy, and he told me, he's like, I've taken that course, that was you. And I actually had lunch with a real estate agent the other day, and when she brought me back to her office to talk to her real estate brokers, and a lot of them are mortgage brokers, and as I'm talking, one of them goes, "Hey,
you're the guy that did it.
Did you?" They said Jim Montrum's course, and I went, "Yeah." They said, "You taught that course. You wrote that whole course." And so I was like, "Oh yeah, I didn't know you. I didn't even think they still taught that course." He says, "Yes."
Yeah, it's law.
Yeah. Well, I figure they switch it out, eventually. And I've had other people talk to me where it's actually in like textbooks. And I'm like, are you serious? They're like, yeah, they've got this thing. It's on you. And it's like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So, I try to do what I could to kind of mitigate the, but there's no making it right. So,
Well, yeah.
whatever. You live with it.
So what are your plans going forward? Where do you want to be in 5 or 10 years, or do you have that thought on a regular basis?
It's funny because there's so many people that want to work with me, like in real estate. That kills me. It kills me, the guys that come to me, send me emails and say they want to do something with me in real estate. Hey, we can do this. We can open a mortgage company. It's like, are you serious? You don't. That's insanity.
I can imagine, but I can put my brain in those people's shoes, as far as it goes with obviously it took some skill and some knowledge to get all this done. So they're thinking, well, I'm going to use his ability for something else.
I agree. Look, I mean, let's face it. Most of the time you talk to a real estate agent or a mortgage broker, and they know a very small segment of the industry, right?
Oh, yeah.
But because of the vastness of the things that I did, and you have to understand, during this whole course, like I've owned 50 some odd rental units, I flipped properties, there's tons of stuff I've done that are perfectly legal. So I've had a vast amount of experience in real estate, but still, even if you take all that into consideration, that's great. But the fact is, currently I'm on what's called federal probation. It's called supervised releases, but it's federal probation. And while I'm on probation, I'm not allowed to work in the real estate industry.
Okay.
So I can't do that. But what I basically did was, while I was incarcerated, I started writing my fellow inmates' true crime stories. You hear so many amazing stories.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
Right. So you hear them and you're like, that's a great story. It's like, God, that should be a movie. Yeah. And some of them, it's just, they're horrible. It's just like, okay, that's tragic. You got 15 years because you brought a gun. You brought a gun to a $10 crack sale, and because you've been arrested twice before, you just got 15 years. That's just, it's stupidity on your part and the government's part.
Yeah, that's not interesting.
Yeah. So that's not interesting. It's tragic, but it's not a story worthy. It's not book worthy. But a lot of guys, you hear their stories, and I would hear, and they're just phenomenal, over the top. It's like nothing I've ever heard. Sure. And it's like, hey, why hasn't anybody written this story?
Yeah.
And so, because they can't, and they can't write their own stories. It's difficult. You get very emotional about it. It's a difficult process.
Yeah.
It took me a year to write my own story.
Yeah, there's so much time packed.
Right. Well, and it'll take me 3 months to write yours, because I can see very clearly what your story is.
Yeah.
But mine, you get it's just too emotional.
I totally get that.
So I started writing their stories, and I started writing synopses of stories, and I ended up with 20 synopses, and I ended up with about 7 actual stories.
That's awesome.
And I got a book published while I was in prison, and then when I got out, I self-published several books on Amazon.
Cool.
And I've optioned the film rights to one story. I've got 2 other ones that are being turned into I call them docudramas. They call them hybrids. They're like documentaries. And I'm supposed to be doing a true crime podcast with a company called Campfire Media.
Huh.
And so it's like I'm doing all these things that are still crime related.
Sure.
But they're, it's true crime, and it's legal, and it's just, that's what I'm doing now. And of course, so I live off my book sales, and I paint. I have a degree in fine arts.
Oh wow!
So I paint pop art paintings, and so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. I imagine it'd be easy to stay out of the real estate field, even with your experience and knowledge of it, and then do all these other things.
Yeah, I've been lucky thus far. Good. Because things have come very easily to me. I mean, you have to understand, when I got to the halfway house, like I went and bought 300. I had nothing. You have 12 and a half years, there's nothing left.
Oh yeah.
Nobody's keeping your stuff. It's gone. And so I remember I went to Walmart and bought $300 worth of clothes at Walmart.
Okay.
Within a couple months, I had gotten a new vehicle, and it's been baby steps. I lived in someone's spare room for a year, a little bit more than a year. I mean, it's just these little tiny baby steps I've been taking, and it's been about 18, 19 months now. But I mean, things that to me, I had very low expectations. Huh? I've been lucky compared to most people in my situation.
Yeah, but it sounds like did you do much planning while you were in prison on the things to get at what you would do to get back on your track? once you get out?
The whole time. Where I think most people are in prison planning their next indictment.
Yeah.
I was in prison planning, like, what are the things you're going to do to, you're going to do this, and you're going to do that, and you're going to spend this much on this, and you're not going to make that decision. You're not going to do that because that's stupid. Don't spend that. You don't get cable. You don't get this. You don't get that. You know, you lower your expectations low enough.
But you come out with a plan that's reasonable to do it. And I think that's kind of the power of listening to a story like you, because it's so similar to my good friend Justin that got out of prison in April. Right. And he spent the whole time in there making the plans. How do I get in business? How do I start these things? He started reading the books because he didn't have that education before he got into prison. He got himself in trouble. He found himself in a bad position. He wanted to make a lot of money quick in an unethical way, and a way that got risk that I can't imagine. And he paid the price in prison for it. But now that he's out, he is subjecting himself to a rigorous process. Yeah. And it's so funny. I'm sure you get this a lot. I hear all these people say, "You're so lucky. I can't believe how lucky you are." And he's like, "I just got out of prison.
Yeah,
I've been here for 6 years.
Creating my own
lost everything." And you were in prison for 12 and a half years, you said? Mm-hmm. He was in prison for 6. And I don't want to tell his story. I don't want to go into that. But he lost so much of the personal stuff that he cared about the most.
Oh, you figure out real quick who your friends are. Real quick.
And that's what he did. And
it's the difference between him and, I bet you if you should ask him this, if you eventually talk to him about this, is that how many other guys that are in there that they're not even thinking about how they're going to get it. It's like literally, it's like you're going to be out in a year. Yeah. I was in prison figuring out how to get my driver's license. I know guys that are like, "Oh, figure that out in the halfway house." Yeah. So you're going to go to the halfway house. Really, you need to be working, saving money, so that when you leave the halfway house, you have somewhere to stay. Instead, you're going to get to the halfway house, set up the ability to get a job. By the time you get your driver's license, all the documents, get your driver's license, if anything goes wrong, you're screwed. Now's the time that you have time. "Oh, I don't want to write them letters. I don't want." It's just, you look at these guys, you're like, "What are you doing? This is your opportunity to fix this." And so many guys they're just not preparing themselves to leave, and the prison system doesn't help you. Yeah, they're not going to help you.
Yeah, and I don't think the prison system knows how to do it. No. If they did, things would be different.
Yeah, well, and it's a bureaucracy, and the people that they're hiring are bureaucrats, and so to them they're just. Listen, there's you have to imagine it being ground down, the bureaucracy they have to deal with, and the inmates, it never stops. It never stops. So, and even if they do something good for 5 inmates, 4 of them screw it up, and it's got to be, it's disheartening, I'm sure, for them. So, I mean, it's not all their fault. Yeah. But they also get to that point where they just give up, and they try. And there's just very little, very little to help an inmate. You really have to do it all yourself. Yeah. And like you said, the whole time he was there thinking about it. The whole time, that's your only chance is to be self-reliant. You have to be your own advocate. Yeah. Nobody's going to be an advocate for you. But that's also the recipe for success, I think. Yeah. And you have to think too. You're on such a regiment there, and it's such a routine that when you get out, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning. Boom, I'm awake. I just like, doesn't matter if I go to bed at 1, doesn't matter if I go to bed, I'm automatically awake. Today I woke up at 5. I started playing on Instagram, making stories. I put up like 6 stories today. I'm like, just stories. What? Because I don't want to get up. I don't want to wake up, Tyler. I don't want to wake anybody. I'm sitting there playing. I'm doing this. I'm answering emails. I'm doing, what I'm saying? It's like I'm laying there. Can't get out of bed yet. There's nothing to do. I'm in Ohio.
So in order to get me into a routine, I go to prison.
Yeah, absolutely. The best routine maker. Or the military, probably. I'd pick the military. I don't know. Military seems tough. I think I'd rather go to prison for a little bit.
He's over here laughing.
Yeah, I don't...
That's crazy. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. The longer style content is something that we look at doing. Make sure you text the number mentioned earlier in the video if you want to participate in these. We've got a lot of people interested in coming to Southern Ohio to talk about business, money, finance, stuff that I think that you would find interesting. Be sure to like the video if you already haven't, and make a comment on how we can improve this type of live stream in the future. Thanks.